Welcome to Plain English, the podcast that goes at the right speed for English language learners. Listen now and read the transcript online at plainenglish.com. Now, here's Jeff, your host for today's episode.
A Chinese pilot safely landed a plane after the windshield blew out at 32,000 feet. Hi, everyone. This is Jeff, and welcome to episode number 50 of Plain English, the podcast that goes at the right speed for English learners. You know, when I was researching podcasting before I started Plain English, I read that most new podcasts last only 7 episodes. 7. A lot of people quit too soon because they think nobody is listening or it's too much work. I can certainly understand the temptation because there were not that many people listening to the first 7 episodes of Plain English, but I'm glad we stuck with it. We are now officially at our 50th program, and I want to say thank you to all of you who are listening. There are thousands of you, and your messages and your encouragement make it all worthwhile. Now, speaking of making it all worthwhile, I wanted to let you know of one thing that I'll be doing to help me cover some of the costs of bringing the program to you. In future episodes, you might hear me make a few brief product recommendations for companies that are partnering with Plain English. You can help support the program by following the links and using the services that I mention. I will only talk about products and services that I use and trust, and that I think will be helpful to you. By having these partnerships, I can keep Plain English free to everyone, including the transcripts. Some English podcasts charge up to $20 per month to read the episode transcripts, but they are free here at Plain English, and they always will be. So keep an ear out for these messages in the future. Just real quick, if you want to follow along with the transcript of this episode, go to the newly redesigned webpage and read along with the free transcript. Today's episode can be found at plainenglish.com/50. It's the stuff of nightmares. A Sichuan Airlines flight departing from the Chinese city of Chongqing at 6:30 a.m. on Monday, heading toward Lhasa, Tibet, had just reached its cruising altitude of 10,000 meters, or about 32,800 feet, when the cockpit windshield blew out. Amazingly, the pilot was able to land the plane safely. The pilot, Captain Liu Chuanjian, said there was no warning sign. Suddenly, the windshield just cracked and made a loud bang. The next thing I know, my co-pilot had been sucked halfway out the window. The co-pilot was saved by the fact that he was wearing his seatbelt. He was able to pull himself back into the cockpit, and he suffered only scratches and a sprained wrist, despite being partially out of the airplane as it was flying at its cruising altitude. Meanwhile, the pilot continued by saying that everything in the cockpit was floating in the air. Most of the equipment malfunctioned, and he couldn't hear the radio. The plane was shaking so hard he couldn't read the instrument panel. If that doesn't sound scary enough, the temperature of the cockpit plummeted to negative 40 degrees Celsius. The air pressure dropped, and the pilots had to deal with extreme sun exposure from being up so high and exposed to the elements. The plane plunged while the pilot grabbed his oxygen mask. After 5 or 6 seconds, he was able to retake control of the plane, an Airbus 319. Incredibly, none of the 119 passengers was injured in the ordeal, and the pilot was able to make an emergency landing just half an hour after the plane departed. A passenger said that the crew had just begun serving breakfast when the aircraft began to shake. The passengers obviously couldn't see the windshield, so they didn't know what had happened. The oxygen masks dropped from overhead, and they felt the plane take a free fall for a few seconds before stabilizing again. It's not uncommon for a windshield to crack or break, but usually only the outer layer breaks. The most common causes are hail, lightning strikes, or crashes with birds. It's extremely rare for the full windshield to crack, like what happened in China. The aircraft in question was placed into service in 2011 and had flown about 20,000 hours without any problems. Experts from Airbus, the manufacturer, arrived in Chengdu to help investigate what happened. Captain Liu, meanwhile, is being hailed on social media as a hero who saved the lives of the passengers on board. The Twitter hashtag #ChinaHeroPilot generated 160 million views and almost 18 million comments on Weibo, a social network. Captain Liu is a former Air Force pilot and trainer who became a passenger jet captain after retiring from military service in 2006. In an interview subsequent to the event, he said, "We are trained for emergency situations like this all the time. When it happened, all I was thinking about was just handling the flight landing well to guarantee the safety of all passengers and cabin crew." For those of us who have never flown a plane and can't imagine the situation, he had this analogy. It was like when you're driving at 50 kilometers an hour and suddenly the car is going 100 kilometers an hour and your hands are out the window. I think it's probably worse than that. Have you ever been the passenger in a car and stuck your head out the window? The airflow coming at your face at just 40 miles per hour is pretty intense. The crew would have had to contend with airflow much more intense than that while flying the plane to safety. Captain Liu's wife called him after hearing about the accident on the news. The captain replied with understatement, "The plane is broken. I'm busy." About 50 of the passengers who had been on that plane took later flights to their destinations in Tibet. I cannot guarantee that I would be willing to get back on a plane so soon after going through something like that. Wow. Before today's word, I wanted to share a little more about the program. You've heard me mention JR before. He is the producer of the show. He's from the state of Veracruz, Mexico, and is living here in Chicago. He's been with me since before episode number 1. He was the first ever listener, and has been encouraging me since the beginning. He edits the audio, corrects my mistakes when I depart from the original version of the transcript. He publishes the webpage for each episode, and he does the Spanish translations too. Although you don't hear his voice, he is a really important part of Plain English. And 2 other people help out each week too. They are Paola from Brazil. She does the Portuguese translations, and Tao from China, who does the Chinese and French translations for the website. So, if you haven't seen the translations yet, go to the newly redesigned plainenglish.com, choose a topic that interests you, and take a look at the instant translations. If you do this regularly, then you have JR, Tao, and Paola to thank. Today's word is hailed, and the context is that Captain Liu is being hailed as a hero. Hailed as a hero. And this means that people are describing Captain Liu as a hero. You want to use hailed as a hero when other people are saying someone is a hero. Prior to the accident, Captain Liu was probably a great pilot, but not generally recognized as a hero. But after landing the plane safely, people began saying he was a hero. They were hailing him as a hero. A man in Tennessee was at a Waffle House restaurant when someone entered with a gun. This man, James Shaw Jr., confronted the gunman and took away the gun, potentially saving the lives of the other restaurant patrons. Mr. Shaw was hailed as a hero for his efforts. He was described and promoted as a hero. You can't use hailed as with too many words, so I'm going to try to tell you each of them today. You heard hailed as a hero. You can also use it with the word success. Something is hailed as a success if, first of all, it is successful, and if people describe it as successful. The Olympics were hailed as a success in promoting peace in Asia. You can say something is hailed as a victory, or that a painting perhaps is hailed as a masterpiece if it is described as a masterpiece by experts. But by far the most common way to use this phrase is to say someone is hailed as a hero. And indeed, Captain Liu is deservedly hailed as a hero for what he did mid-air over China. That's it for episode 50. JR and I thank you for sticking with us for 50 episodes. I know some of them have been better than others, but I think we can hail this podcast as a success so far, at least for the first 50 attempts. We'll be back on Thursday with a new episode. Thanks again for listening.